I'd like to welcome you to today's session of Speaker's Corner. By way of introduction, my name is Gabor Zinner. I'm the founder of Speaker's Corner, a local lawyer, and the self-proclaimed Grand Mufti of Pumpkin Park. For those of you who are unaware of what a mufti is, these are Muslim scholars who interpret and expound religious law. And in every jurisdiction, there is, the foremost among them is called the Grand Mufti. It's true that I know nothing about Islamic law, but that never stopped anybody. On a more serious note, we're going to have a very interesting debate today. The topic is, which is more rational, Christianity or atheism? And the speakers will be introduced momentarily. Before the introductions, though, I'd just like to give you, how many, by show of hands, how many of you are here for the first time? Okay, well, it's great. Thank you. My compliments to you for coming. Just by way of background, we try to emulate the example that is practiced in many democratic centers, and most notably at Hyde Park in London, England. It's a fresh air experience offered to Calgarians to address and debate topical issues. We are not advocates of political correctness. We welcome all points of view. We recognize that the heresy of yesterday is the orthodoxy of tomorrow, and vice versa. And we try to emulate. The mission statement for the CBC is that they intend to, their mission statement bids them to inform, inspire, and entertain. We'd like to do likewise. So we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we nonetheless bring forward topics that merit serious consideration. We had a very stimulating topic 2 weeks ago, and next week as well. In fact, you may have heard that there's been an announcement that 109 people are 600 and, well, a huge 106 people are slated to be executed in Egypt, and the topic for debate next week as to whether or not this will result in meting out justice or whether it's an atrocity. If you wish to be notified of topics and speakers as and when they come up, there's the Speaker's Corner Calgary meetup site. If you register there, you'll always be notified as to what's coming up and when. There's no cost, no obligation, no one will ever call you. So having said that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Leah Bailey to call upon our speakers and to introduce them. Aaliyah?
I'd also like to thank everyone for being out on this beautiful day. See how much I butcher this today. Okay, so first we're going to have Christine Shellska speaking, and she will be in favor of atheism. Christine is a PhD candidate in the Department of Communications, Media, and Film, Faculty of Art, and at the University of Calgary here in Canada. Her research involves, I think we know, well, there's one in Texas. Okay, I'll give you that one. Her research involves studying the rhetorical strategies employed by the intelligent design creationism movement, and her area of focus includes history, philosophy, and sociology of science and rhetoric. Among other involvements in the secular community, she is the president of Atheist Alliance International and the first Canadian to be elected to the board of directors for the American Humanist Association, and is a regular co-host in the Calgary-based Legion of Reason podcast. And now ask Christine.
So thank you very much for that introduction and for inviting me to participate in this debate. Thank you to Jojo for agreeing to debate with me, and thank you all for coming out today. One of the first things I'd like to make clear is that atheism is merely the lack of a belief in a god or gods. When I claim to be an atheist, that says nothing about what I actually believe. Atheists come in all stripes. There are atheists who believe in ghosts, horoscopes, and the afterlife. There are homophobic and racist atheists, and there are even some atheists who want to believe in a God and think we'd be better off as a society ruled by believers. However, many atheists share in common a tendency toward philosophical skepticism. That is, the ethical imperative to remain agnostic about claims in the absence of evidence, and to change our minds in light of it. I am one of these. Atheism is a claim about belief. Agnosticism is a claim about knowledge. It would be intellectually dishonest for me to reject evidence of a God or gods, but thus far none has been forthcoming. Indeed, as our scientific understanding of reality increases, we find refutations of the empirical claims presented in holy texts, and gods being marginalized to the gaps of our knowledge, desperately invoked by believers to explain that which we do not yet know and might never. The agnostic says, "Show me and I'll believe." Christian apologists attempt to place the onus on the atheist to demonstrate the non-existence of a God, knowing full well that we already concede that a negative claim cannot be demonstrated. Here's a little thought experiment. The next time you come across a claim pertaining to the existence of God, replace the word God with unicorn or fairy or flying spaghetti monster, and consider whether you would believe that claim to be true. You would have to concede the logical possibility that these things can exist because you can't prove they don't. You cannot know they don't exist, therefore you are agnostic, from the Latin without knowledge, about these entities, but you would rightfully be skeptical about their existence and demand some sort of empirical evidence before you believed in them, and that makes you an atheist when it comes to unicorns, fairies, and the flying spaghetti monster. Similarly, if you're a Christian, then you are atheistic about other religions. As Richard Dawkins puts it, we are all atheists, we just go one God further. But the debate over the existence of God is a long-standing philosophical one that remains unresolved, and it is not the focus of our discussion here today. The takeaway point that I want you to remember here is that atheism is merely the lack of a belief in gods. It is not a positive claim like God exists. What is at stake here for the purposes of this debate is secularism. The belief that society is better off when church and state are kept separate, and this view is not unique to atheists. Most Canadians of all faiths and none recognize this as one of the core foundations of our democracy. The purpose of this separation is to prevent one religion from being privileged over another, so that the rights of those who do not adhere to that religion cannot be violated. There is no atheist agenda being advanced in the public sphere, but there is a secular agenda, and that is to protect the rights and freedoms of all Canadians. Secularism is enshrined in our charter, which states that every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. Secularism protects our most fundamental freedoms, which include freedom of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression. Secularism protects all of us, believers and non-believers alike, from theocratic intervention by the dominant religion. And in Canada, the dominant religion is Christianity. Now, while I was preparing for this talk, I learned that my esteemed opponent, Jojo Ruba, is the executive director for Faith Beyond Belief, whose vision is, quote, a Canada where the Christian worldview is recognized as truth and Christians are bold ambassadors for Christ, unquote, and whose mission is, quote, to equip Canadians to think seriously about the claims of Christ and to train Christians to give reasons for the hope they have with gentleness and respect. Since I agreed to speak first, I am placed in the position of having to anticipate my opponent's claims. So to help me prepare, I consulted my favorite psychic, Google. Google predicted that what Jojo is going to engage in here today is religious apologetics. I want to make it clear here what religious apologetics is. According to Bible.com, it is, in its most simple terms, the defense of the Christian faith. So I want you to be aware that this is a rhetorical strategy, an attempt to persuade you to believe in, or if you are ready to believe in it, to reinforce a Christian worldview. And not just any Christian worldview, but a particular one. My opponent is going to try to persuade you that he knows the truth, that this truth is based on an objective morality based on certain cherry-picked biblical claims, and those who do not understand this truth don't properly understand the Christian worldview. Please be assured, I understand it, I just don't agree with it. I am not going to make any claims to know the truth, and my opponent is going to use this to attempt to paint me as a moral relativist, someone who believes there is no right and wrong. Painting me as a moral relativist will give my opponent the opportunity to present some scenario, the Holocaust, rape, or perhaps one of his favorite issues, abortion, and then accuse me of being incapable of taking a moral stance because I do not embrace the so-called objective truth of the Bible. This is a rhetorical tactic known as straw manning, setting up a false representation of your opponent's views and then using it to tear down an argument he or she didn't actually make. So I want to make it clear, I am not a moral relativist. I am a moral contextualist. I believe that as our understanding of reality becomes more robust, we become increasingly aware of the consequences of our actions toward human and non-human animals and toward our planet. If this were not the case, we would still be practicing slavery and witch burning and hoisting up bags of live cats and burning them for entertainment like they did in the Middle Ages. And if we took seriously this so-called biblical morality, objective morality, we would be obliged to stone our neighbors to death if we saw them working on a Sunday, or wearing mixed fabrics, or eating shellfish, or shaving and cutting their hair, as commanded in Leviticus. And why are there not commandments forbidding rape, or slavery, or genocide, or infanticide? Not only do these commandments not exist, the Bible explicitly commands these behaviors. Is this the kind of society we want to live in? No. We have evolved as social creatures, and behaving in ways that we would want others to behave toward us has helped our kin groups to survive, and later, our societies to flourish. Our collective and cumulative understanding of reality has brought about modern science, which when deployed with empathy and humility, has contributed far more to addressing the material needs of humanity than has religion. We have evolved as a species to exhibit both reason and compassion, and these are tools critical to guiding our moral compass in a world of uncertainty and change. This is the crux of humanism, the ethical worldview that asserts we don't need God to be good. As an apologist, my opponent might question my appeal to science to explain morality, and might also speak about things of which he knows nothing, like the origin of the universe, to try to belittle science and trivialize and possibly demonize the insights we as a species have derived from it. He might assert that evolution is only a theory, and that something like a creator or an intelligent designer provides a better explanation for the development of life. This is yet another rhetorical tactic, to conflate confidence in science with atheism. Science is a collective accumulation of knowledge about the natural world, but it is also a method of inquiry. My opponent might also try to claim that atheism is a religion, but as I've already stated, it is the absence of belief in a god or gods. Atheism is a religion, like smoking is a habit, or like abstinence is a sex position. Science, on the other hand, concerns itself with the natural and not the supernatural world, because credible science as a community deem it intellectually lazy to dismiss that which we don't know with God did it. Scientific hypotheses earn the status of becoming theories only after they have undergone rigorous and repeated tests and experiments to attempt to falsify them and withstood the scrutiny and criticism of the scientific community. Science is self-correcting. When errors, miscalculation, and even frauds are identified, they are identified by science, who dedicate their lives to acquiring the relevant knowledge to participate in their fields, not by armchair critics, especially those who are interested in discrediting the endeavor rather than contributing something constructive, like an empirically testable alternative hypothesis. Like atheism, science is not a religion either, although my opponent might try to claim that it is, because it rests upon foundational assumptions, like materialism, the belief that all that exists is composed of matter and energy. This is true of any intellectual endeavor. If some sort of assumption didn't at least initially guide its pursuit, the entire enterprise would never have gotten off the ground. What distinguishes science from religion is that the scientific community holds knowledge claims to be provisional, and they are willing to reconsider and even reject those claims when confronted with refuting evidence. Unlike my opponent, science doesn't claim to offer the truth. What it does offer is an explanation of our natural world within the constraints of our species' limited capacity to understand it at this historical moment. Science has always gotten things wrong, and it will continue to get things wrong. But as it proceeds, it will also continue to get things less wrong. And this is why science can help inform morality. We can and have learned more about ourselves and the creatures that inhabit our planet, and much of what we learn has compelled us toward a more compassionate stance toward those we regard as others. In light of modern science, only a bigot can regard a person whose skin is a different color as being an inferior race, or who does not identify as heterosexual as being deviant or a threat to family values in traditional marriage, which incidentally, according to the Bible, is polygamy and not monogamy. This is not moral relativism. It's an ethical stance that responds to evidence with reason and compassion within the constraints of our knowledge and within the context of the uncertainty and change that characterize the social realm. It's a set of tools that we can deploy to help us adjust our moral compass as individuals, as society, and as a global community. There is no such thing as an objective morality. If there were, we'd still own slaves. We'd stone our neighbors if we caught them mowing their lawn on a Sunday afternoon, and we'd burn people like me at the stake for being a witch or a heretic. So I hope this helps to clarify my worldview and how my moral compass is oriented, and to lure you to some of the rhetorical tactics you are likely to encounter when my opponent questions how I, as an atheist, could possibly have any moral basis for defending human rights. And despite my waxing philosophically, what really matters is the here and now, and how these competing worldviews play out in Canadian society. I think Jojo and I both agree that freedom of speech is a fundamental right enshrined by our charter, but some Christians will claim that they are being silenced or even persecuted. On the secular take, though, Christian privilege remains a problem in our society, and our own Supreme Court recognized this when they recently ruled against prayer at City Council meetings. Now, it should be made clear that this does not prevent City Council members from praying on their own time. They just can't do it on the taxpayers' dime. What was taken away was not a right, but rather a long-held privilege. I also know that Jojo has worked tirelessly for the pro-life community. I commend him for this work and for his principles, and I fully support his right to free speech. However, some of this speech comes in the form of some rather graphic imagery that is inappropriate for young viewers not yet prepared to participate in the marketplace of ideas, and those who display such materials where children can see them should rightfully expect a response of outrage from angry parents. And one who is clearly coming down on the wrong side of history on settled issues like abortion and gay marriage and the right to die with dignity can expect other sides to exercise their freedom of speech to marginalize those ideas. And in particular, when one attempts to interfere with legislation crafted to maximize the rights and freedoms of all Canadians, one can expect backlash. This is not an attempt to stifle or persecute Christians. It is an attempt to counter free speech with more free speech. If you don't want an abortion, don't have one. There are reasons why women choose to have abortions that have nothing to do with promiscuity, and sometimes this medical procedure is necessary to save their lives. We know that restricting women's reproductive rights results in unwanted pregnancies and dangerous back alley abortions, so leave them alone. And if you don't like gay marriage, don't marry a gay person. And if you believe in redemptive suffering and you want your loved ones to watch you suffer horrifically from some disease, you go ahead and do that. But most Canadians agree that consenting adults have the right to decide what to do with their own lives and their own bodies, so long as they cause others no harm. And that brings me to my question for Jojo. Why do you care what others do with their lives and bodies? My guess is that my opponent might invoke some paternalistic concept of love because he believes he knows the truth and can correct and judge others on the basis of his biblical morality. Perhaps he even believes there will be a rapture and a second coming of Christ, and that we sincerely need saving. But why shouldn't the non-Christian believe that? And why would a Christian care if people like me go to hell? My guess is that Jojo is going to speak as though it has already been established, indeed that it is self-evident, that the Christian God exists. But the truth of this claim has not been established, and that which is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Those of us who don't believe in the Christian God see this brand of apologetics as an attempt to impose the Christian morality on our society and to take away the rights and freedoms of other Canadians. Our world views dictate our acts and our behavior toward our fellow human beings, and our acts have practical consequences in the here and now. The assertion of this particular Christian worldview is essentially an attempt to establish a theocracy, and that clearly runs counter to our Canadian democracy and the secular values enshrined in our charter. Now, I want to remind everybody that the topic of the debate here is which view is more rational, Christianity or atheism. Since atheism is a negative plane, it can't reasonably be deemed rational or irrational. So what we're really talking about here is secularism. The question becomes this: which view is more rational, Christianity or secularism? So my question to you as an audience is, what kind of a society do you want to live in? A theocracy, where your bodily autonomy and social autonomy are restricted by biblical commands? Or a democracy, where everyone's right to exercise their beliefs and their autonomy is protected? Finally, I want to remind the audience that Christian apologetics is a rhetorical tactic based on specious claims derived from manipulated logic and with no evidential support. It is intended to convince you of the truth of Christianity and to restrict your autonomy according to a so-called objective morality, not toward advancing democracy and the rights and freedoms of Canadians. I also want you to know that there is nothing incompatible with being a Christian and a secularist, and nothing barring Christians from embracing and celebrating science. There is no conspiracy of scientists who are trying to impose an atheistic religion on your children or anything like that. So don't buy into those claims if they're presented here or elsewhere. I hope I've alerted you to some of the rhetorical strategies that might be employed here, so let us now remove our tinfoil hats and instead don our nonsense detectors. Thank you.
Be nice. You'll have your turn if you want to have a set. Now, folks, we ask that you allow our speakers to have their say, and I thank you that you did that for our first speaker until the end. We do have an open microphone where you will be able to have your say if you wish to come up. We will be forming a line after. I will let you know when we're going to start that. Our next speaker is Jojo, and he is representing the Christian view. And Jojo Ruba is the executive director of the Faith Beyond Belief, which equips effective ambassadors for Christ for everyday conversation. Faith Beyond Belief teaches Christians to effectively explain and defend their faith using reasonable arguments that make sense to non-believers. Jojo has spoken at venues across Canada, including at Sunday morning services, secular debates on universities, and morning chapel at Christian schools. He earned a Bachelor of Journalism and a Master in Political Science from Carleton University in Ontario. And I call for Jojo.
I too want to thank you for being here today and to discuss this really important issue. I think it's one of the most important issues actually we have to discuss, which is what is the right way to view the world. And I also want to thank the organizer of Speaker's Corner. What a great privilege to be able to celebrate our rights of freedom of speech and freedom of religion, freedom of non-religion in a great country like ours, to be able to discuss these issues. And also, of course, want to thank my opponent, Christine, as well. She is a well-spoken person. Obviously, she's an expert on rhetoric, and all of the things she said is well harnessed in her skill set. You know, what's interesting is, though, she's accused me of using rhetoric I haven't actually used yet, but nowhere in her argument does she actually say just because something's rhetorical, it means it's false. Because that itself is a rhetorical tool she's using to poison the well against me by you. So let's make sure, if we're going to use rhetorical skills, let's make sure they apply to both speakers today. I grew up, I was born in the Philippines. I grew up in Winnipeg. And Winnipeg's a great town, I love it, but you know, Winnipeg's greatest export are Winnipeggers. And so when I left for school, I actually went to Ottawa and studied there. My first year in Ottawa, I realized I didn't actually know anybody in town. And the thought crossed my mind that if I stopped going to church, no one would ever know. Frankly, no one would ever know if I stopped becoming a Christian, dropped out altogether. And really, I entertained this idea just for a little bit, until I met a friend who I met at a Christian club at the university. There, I talked to him, and he told me his testimony. He came from a background where his dad was a backslidden Catholic, his mom was a backslidden Muslim, and he was very confused about what he should believe. but he was also a computer scientist. And it was very clear that he wanted to make sure his understanding of science matched whatever religious faith he was going to believe in. And so he began to test the different religious worldviews that was available to him and compare it with what he knew from science, from technology, from philosophy. For example, he looked at Hinduism and realized Hinduism is incompatible with what we know about the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang. And he rejected Hinduism as a religion that he should believe in. He looked at Mormonism and saw geographically there were no places that the Book of Mormon actually mentioned that were real. And so he couldn't accept that. And so when he finally looked at Christianity, he realized this is the faith that matches everything I know from science, from philosophy, from all of these areas of truth, of study. And that's why he became a Christian. And it challenged me to realize and to ask myself, am I a Christian because I grew up in this background in my faith? Or am I a Christian because it's true? And now my opponent has questioned the existence of objective truth, and that's fine. She's obviously allowed to question that. But anyone who asks or says that there is no such thing as objective truth often has to assert that as objectively true, don't they? And that's exactly what she's done. But regardless, the point that we're here today, I think, is an essential topic when it comes to the religion and faith and beliefs. And I want to be able to bring that same challenge that my friend gave me when I went to university to this discussion here. Eugenie Scott, the atheist in the States, actually came up with a term called the Gish Gallop. Christine used it last time when she was debating here. And the argument goes like this. Your opponent brings up so many straw man arguments, so many false claims, that you can't address the main topic without having to maneuver through these topics. And it looks like you haven't been able to answer all her points. And frankly, I don't have time to answer all her points today. But I want to be able to address the main point here, because she hasn't been able to address it well. The argument that's here today is, which is more rational, atheism or Christianity? And for my session here, all I'm going to do is define atheism, define rationality, and define Christianity. And by doing so, I think it becomes obvious that the only rational decision to make when you compare these two worldviews and when you look at the definition of rationality is that Christianity offers the best explanation. That doesn't mean, of course, that Christianity is automatically true. That's a different debate. I'm willing to do that and talk about that debate with you later on if you want to chat with me or email our ministry. But in terms of this discussion itself, I think it makes sense to believe that Christianity is definitely more rational than atheism. So let's begin. When we look at atheism, there's already a debate about what it actually means. Dictionary.com says, atheism is a person who believes or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods. And there's a little bit of a disingenuous definition here in terms of what Christine is saying. She's equivocating two terms. She's taking the term that says it's a lack of belief in something and applying it to this discussion and saying, therefore, it's not a belief. Well, first of all, that's a little unfair, because in this situation, if we're talking about a lack of belief in something, obviously we all have a lack of belief in something, right? We don't believe in leprechauns. We don't believe in unicorns. But that's not what the debate here is about, is it? The debate here is, do we believe there's a God that exists? And this God, clearly, if we're debating Christianity, is the Christian God, the one that's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, who created the universe, the source of the universe and everything in it, including rationality and morality. And therefore, that position has clear worldview implications. It defines how you view the world. And even if we disagree of whether or not atheism is a belief, I'll put that to the side. We can have that discussion later. It clearly is a worldview, a way of understanding how the world is. Now, when we look at what atheism as a worldview entails, atheism, and this is from atheists.org, AmericanAtheist.org, says atheism may be defined as a mental attitude which unreservedly accepts the supremacy of reason and aims at establishing a lifestyle and ethical outlook verifiable by experience and scientific method, independent of all arbitrary assumptions of authority and creeds. Sounds pretty authoritative. It just makes me wonder where they get that authority from. The Atheist Alliance, Christine's own organization, has a vision for their organization, which is a secular world where public policy, scientific inquiry, and education are not influenced by religious beliefs, but based upon sound reasoning, rationality, and evidence. Which makes me think her view of atheism is that. It's based on sound reasoning, rationality, and evidence. So then that leads me to think, well, what does she mean by rationality? I looked at her website, I couldn't really find what she meant. But Rational Wiki, which is a Wikipedia site used by atheists, defines it this way. Rationality is the use of logical reasoning in the areas of discourse and problem solving. It is also the quality of being rational. Okay? So far, not controversial. I believe that too. That's a good thing, and I think Christians are called to be rational ourselves. There's more on that later. Like many basic words, its meaning can be obscure and sometimes difficult. To be rational is generally considered to mean employing logical consistency and deriving appropriate conclusions from acceptable assumptions. There are two types of rationality it mentions here. There's the rationality that when what you believe is consistent with reality. There's also a kind of rationality when what you believe is consistent internally. So if you, for example, preach that you shouldn't do drugs, and you also don't do drugs, that's being rational according to your beliefs. It doesn't mean doing drugs is right or wrong, it just means you're consistent with it. And those are the two definitions of rationality. Again, I hope that's not controversial. This is from an atheist or a skeptic website, so I think that's quite clear that this is something that Christians made up. However, when we talk about the origins of rationality from an atheist worldview, as Christine said, it's materialistic. There's no supernatural elements that created the universe that we did. There's no creator. It all came through random chance, which means that the origins of rationality are by accident. We're here by accident. There's no purpose or design for rationality. In fact, when we look at what Richard Dawkins said about the origins of the universe, this is what he says. The total amount of suffering per year in the natural world is beyond all decent contemplation. During the minute minute that it takes me to compose the sentence, thousands of animals being eaten alive, many others are running for their lives, whimpering with fear, others are slowly being devoured from within by rasping parasites. Thousands of all kinds are dying of starvation, thirst, and disease. It must be so. If there ever is a time of plenty, this fact will automatically lead to an increase in the population until the natural state of starvation and misery is restored. In a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces, and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme of reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. That is the origin of rationality from an atheistic worldview. Richard Dawkins, I think, won't disagree. That's his definition of it. So when we look at what that means then, the question that I would ask is if rationality merely comes from this pitiless, indifferent world, why should we be rational? I think that's a fair question, right? If it's just merely a product of chance, why is it that we should be rational? Which is, by the way, the heart of this debate, not the stuff that Christine talked about. Rationality must defeat irrationality, according to the Legion of Reason, Christine's podcast as well, because irrationality, they compared it to, in a recent podcast with Peter Boghossian, I think he was here in Calgary a year ago, with wishful thinking. Boghossian even compared faith as a faith virus that is comparable to schizophrenia. So faith then must be treated by non-faith, by rationality, which is the reason why we must be rational from an atheist worldview. In fact, the American Human Alliance, a humanist alliance, which Christine is part of, says humanism is a worldview which says that reason and science are the best ways to understand the world around us, and that dignity and compassion should be the basis for how you act towards someone else, which is basically what she argued today. Now, all of that seems reasonable, I guess, but if you think about how we define rationality here from an atheist perspective, there seems to be quite a bit of issues with demanding rationality or expecting rationality from people. First, rationality does not seem necessary for survival or for human flourishing. Rationality is not necessary for survival or human flourishing. Think about it. In animals, deceit is a huge part of their survival. We think about birds that make themselves look bigger, or butterflies with eyes or spots on it to make itself look like something that can't be eaten. The cuckoo bird is one of my favorite birds. It actually lays its egg in the nest of other birds so that it can pretend to be that bird and then be fed by those parents. Deceit, lack of truth, is a huge part of what nature offers. Now, but that's about animals deceiving other animals. How about themselves? Well, that actually happens too. Animals often get facts wrong about the world, and that still helps them survive. There was a story of a little wild boar piglet that got lost and managed to imprint itself on a herd of cows. And this little piglet was able to survive the summer because it was attached to this herd of cows because it thought it was a cow. In fact, one of my good friends has a cockatiel, and this cockatiel's partner had died many years ago. And the only way this cockatiel can survive, if you know these kinds of birds, is to have a flock to help it survive. So this cockatiel imprinted on the family hosting it, and now it thinks everybody is a cockatiel or it's a human being. Right? It doesn't have to know the truth for it to have a survivability. And I think this is an important fact that Christine and other atheists don't seem to realize. Truth is not the number one reason to be reasonable in their worldview. When it comes to rationality, it serves only as a survival method. And that means reason and truth aren't the most important thing. Now, does that work for humans? Well, I think so too. When we think about humans believe lots of false things, and yet they're still thriving in our universe, aren't they? In fact, when we look at one of the things that atheists believe is false, it actually has helped, according to evolutionary psychologists, at least in terms of our survivability. You know what, that one false thing that we have, according to atheists, it's religion. When we think about religion, Pascal Boyer, who's not a Christian, says, is religious belief a mere leap into irrationality, as many skeptics assume? Is psychology suggests that there may be more to belief than the suspension of religion? He says, religious beliefs and practices are found in all human groups and go back to the very beginning of human culture. What makes religion so natural? A common temptation is to search for the origin of religion in general human urges. For instance, in people's wish to escape misfortune or mortality or the desire to understand the universe. In other words, from their own worldview, religion must serve some evolutionary function for our survival. Richard Saucis and Candace Alcorta, in an article called Signaling Solidarity and the Sacred, the Evolution of Religious Behavior, asks, well, religion is often very costly. It costs us time and money and resources, so why are people religious? They said this, researchers have sought to unravel this dilemma by positing somatic, reproductive, and psychological benefits conferred by religious behaviors on their practitioners that could outweigh these costs. Realized benefits include improved health, survivorship, economic opportunities, sense of community, psychological well-being, assistance during crisis, mating opportunities, and fertility. Religion, therefore, even if false in an atheist worldview, serves some biological function that helps humanity survive here on Earth. So then the question that I would like to turn around and ask my opponent and people like her is this. So why do you bother changing our minds? If religion is a natural function of humanity, why are you here trying to convince people through your organization to not be religious? In fact, I asked this question of John Loftus, a famous atheist who was here a few years ago debating this topic. And after debating this issue, I laid out these facts to him and asked him, so why are you here trying to convince people to be non-religious? And his response basically was, well, I've done all this research and I basically want to sell my books. That was it. Because what else can you say? If what her worldview is true, that religion is false and atheism is more rational, then in that worldview, why change the minds of people who are religious? In fact, what she has argued here is that we should change the mind of people who are irrational religious because they do morally bad things. She made a whole list of morally bad things that I have done, apparently, or at least in her worldview. Whether it's advocating for preborn human beings, which biology, by the way, not the Bible, says are human beings. She says we show scary pictures to people on the streets. Again, these pictures are of the truth, not of what I believe, and that we're homophobic and hateful or even bigoted when we take these positions that we do on sexuality. Now, she now says she's a contextualist, and I understand what she's saying, that in the context of things like morality, we learn to have more information, we have more information, therefore we have a better morality. In fact, in her quote, in her argument, she actually said, society is better off without religion being privileged over another. So then the question I would ask her is, what do you mean by better? If there is no objective morality, whose standard are you using to say that your view is better? When Christine earlier this year actually spoke at the United Nations to speak against female genital mutilation and against the use of women in many of these countries in terms of honor killings. And she said those countries were wrong for doing that. She insisted that we have these countries protect those women's rights and that these countries respect human rights in general. And you know what? I agree with her. She's absolutely right to do that. But the question is, from an atheistic worldview perspective, where is the morality that she's using to make that judgment? If morality is not objective, and if it's not something that's true for every society, for every time period, for every person in every place, then isn't she just imposing her morality on those Muslim countries and others when she says they should behave a certain way? She can't argue both sides here. If objective morality doesn't exist, why does she insist that we live according to her morality? The other problem, I think, is, again, from her own podcast. One of the articles I found there was a guy named Randy, who talked about what he as an atheist believes, which is determinism. He says this: the kerfuffle itself shows how difficult it is to let go of the illusion that we have free will, that there's a ghost in the machine pulling the levers, higgledy-piggledy. Even determinists try to save themselves from the realization that free will is an illusion by stating that while impulses are indeed determined, acting on these impulses is not. This is a position known as compatibilism and espoused by Daniel Dennett and has grown a number of adherents. I was once one, but not one anymore. What made me go all the way to the dark side of full-blown determinism? It was scarily simple. An argument presented most ably by Alex Rosenberg. It says all that one needs to remember is this: physics fixes all facts. In other words, there is no mind that makes decisions that you can change. All you can do in an atheistic worldview is know that you are determined by your DNA. Now, to be fair, Christine didn't write this article, but I'd like to ask her what she believes. What is it that makes the decision to be rational? Because if she can't even give us that, then why is she arguing that rationality in atheism is better than in Christianity? My last couple of minutes here, I just want to point out the definition for Christianity is not wishful thinking. Speaking of straw man, that's one. We do not believe that the universe was just a God of the gaps kind of argument that we believe in. That is not what we believe as Christians. We believe because the universe was created by a mind, that universe can therefore be understandable by our minds. Because rationality is grounded in something beyond us, by actually someone who has thought through and who knows these things. We can therefore understand the universe and be rational itself. More than that, we should be rational if we want to learn how that maker, how that mind works as well. Ultimately, what's interesting is when I come to Scripture, many people think the Bible is full of contradictions. 65% of Canadians think it contradicts itself. But 55% of Canadians have never read it. So let me read one passage, I think, that will help you realize the Bible is not interested in being irrational. Luke chapter 1, who read the Gospel of Luke, says, "Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who were from the beginning eyewitnesses and servants of the word, it seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught." Luke was writing to his friend Theophilus not to believe things because it makes you feel better. He's saying, I've investigated and done the research, talked to the witnesses, so that you know what you believe as a Christian is true historically, factually, physically. In fact, the Apostle Paul in Corinthians even says, if the resurrection of Jesus never happened, we are to be most pitiable for what we believe. What we should believe is in vain. Our faith is in vain if it's not true. 1 Corinthians 15, 3-9. I want to close off then, just so with a reminder, because I think it's important to point out, even in this discussion, the fact that we're looking for answers and logic and reason points to the fact that the universe we have is understandable because it was made by a mind. Christine says an agnostic questions things and says, show me evidence and I'll believe. Well, let me read this. In John 14:8, Jesus is arguing with Philip, and Philip says to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. Jesus said to him, have I been so long with you, and yet you have not come to know me? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? See, the historical evidence for the the case for Jesus, for who he is, the fact that he actually existed, that the church began, the fact that people who did not believe in a resurrection began to believe, shows the fact that the agnostic may say, show us evidence to not believe, but Jesus has already said, I am the evidence. Why don't you believe? That's why the Christian worldview is more rational than the atheist one, because Christianity can not only give us a reason why rationality exists, but why we should be rational. Thank you.
Thank you both. Christine, you have an opportunity to provide a brief rebuttal, should you so choose.
Okay, so the question posed to me was, why should we change our minds? And I think I made it pretty clear in my talk that we should change our minds in light of better evidence. So I don't really see too much need to reiterate what I've already said about evidence and how it can help us make better decisions in terms of our social and historical location. My opponent has suggested that I am here to try to convert people to atheism. That's not the case. I don't care what you believe. In fact, secularism supports your right to believe as you choose, and I support secularism, and that's why I think it's a more rational view. In terms of the example brought up about female genital mutilation, that is a dictate of a moral objective morality, objective morality. And that's why we try to, as secular people, to try and undo those constraints on humans' bodies and their social autonomy, right? And finally, Jojo said something about the rules of logic and this sort of things comes from the creator of the universe and this sort of thing. This is a claim that I've heard before too. And I just want you to know that rationality and even atheism long precedes Christianity. Thank you.
Jojo, do you have a brief rejoinder, but only to what was just said?
Well, again, arguing that objective morality is responsible for female genital mutilation and therefore objective morality is wrong is an objectively moral statement, isn't it? You're saying that's wrong to believe that, and that's objective morality as well. So it's just a matter of semantics here. But when we talk about being able to share reasons for what we believe and rationality, absolutely, that predates what we call Christianity today, but it doesn't predate the Christian God. That's the point. In fact, when you look at even universities that are created in Canada, many of them have slogans that represent and honor God because they believe God is the source of knowledge and the source of the mind that helps us understand the knowledge. Even the University of Calgary, where Christine studies, actually has as their motto Psalms 121 verse 1, which says, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And that's what the Christian worldview says. Knowledge, logic, and reason make sense to be all of those things because they come from our Creator God. If you don't have a source for rationality, why should you be rational? That's the question Christine has failed to answer this afternoon.
So we are truly grateful to our speakers. You will have an opportunity to come up and put questions and comments to the speakers. Speakers take of their time. They take time to prepare. They give of themselves. They take certain emotional risks by being up here and exposing themselves to public view and expounding their points of view. So we like to honor them, and we typically do by offering them each a certificate of appreciation. And to each of, there's a certificate to each of Jojo and Christine. And we say, presented to you for dedicating time and effort by speaking at Speaker's Corner. Thanks to your contribution of ideas and energy, we are better able to inform, enlighten, and entertain a more vibrant Calgary. So please help me thank our speakers. I do have another certificate of appreciation to a lady who's likely not expecting it, and this is Dr. Bailey. Many of you might remember Mussolini, the fascist leader who was in league with Hitler, and he was universally reviled. But he was known for one good thing, and he was the only guy that was able to make the trains run on time in Italy. Before that, it was all chaos, and he did that right. And Dr. Bailey is our lead organizer, and you may, well, it takes untold time, and these things don't just happen by themselves. We reach out to countless people, we look for topics, we look for speakers. We're fortunate when we're successful in attracting them. And this lady is the lady who makes the trains run. So we say to you, Dr. Bailey, as lead organizer, you dedicate untold time and effort, not only to making the trains run on time, but also to building them. Okay, so please accept this. And just following up, we have 27 Sundays, because unfortunately we have a very short seasonable season here in Calgary, and we don't have all the Sundays filled, and we're ceaselessly looking for topics and speakers and topics. So if anyone out there has any particular issue that animates you, you'd like to have debated, like to speak to, like to address, please approach us. We need ideas, we need speakers, and we recruit from the street, so to speak. So having said that, who would like to speak, ask a question? You, sir? Yeah, come on. Whoops. Oh, by the way, we try to impose a 2-minute time limit so that everyone gets a chance, but if there isn't a huge line forming, we get more indulgent. And if everyone has his say, we'll sometimes give a second round.
All right, well, I don't want to time it, so please say time when I'm done. And forgive me, because it's not really a question to either one. Thank you so much, both of you. That was really fantastic. I just want to say that I actually come from the Christian camp, and the reason is actually that I couldn't, if any of you said, prove to me that there is a God, I can't do it. Unless, of course, God so chose to maybe do a miracle through me or something like that, which is where we have the basis for believing in the first place. That's what Jesus did. And that's what you can find in the Bible. But the point is, I used to be a an immoral person, and not largely and overtly to a point where I spent time in jail or anything. I mean, I had my problems with the law, but nevertheless, I used to be that way, and virtually selfish. As much as nobody likes to really admit being selfish, I was. Okay, I wanted to do it my way and my things. Anyways, and I don't want to, okay, I'll get myself on track here again. But the point is, I simply needed help with something. I had to overcome things that were killing me with respect to drugs, cigarettes, things like this. I kind of liked the lifestyle, but those things were killing me. And so I actually asked God. I said, God, will you please help me to quit these things? And that's a miracle and something separate, and he actually did, okay? He just did. Whether you believe it or not, whatever. I am a living testimony today because of that. And one other thing, in high school, with the boys, you know, I went to a Catholic high school, and the boys were chatting and saying, oh, I believe in God and everything, but you know this and but that, and kind of sharing their philosophy. And mine was, well, I believe in God because it's obvious to me that he exists, and I didn't really think we came from monkeys, and I thought that was kind of ridiculous. So I said, but if he were to ever reveal himself to me in some kind of a personal way, then I would know it's true and I wouldn't be living the way I'm living. Well, then I kept on living the way I was living, and then this change happened where I asked God to help me with this certain thing, and that worked. And then I actually went to church also, and I went to this crusade, this traveling evangelist guy. How many? 30 seconds? Traveling evangelist guy came to town, told the gospel, told about Jesus, and you know what? I was sitting in my seat, minding my business, and next thing you know, I was just crying like a baby because God actually did that. He touched me. He gave me a touch of love and showed me that what this person is saying is real. And basically, Jesus was reaching out his hand, saying, take my hand. I took it, and I was what the Bible is called born again. And here I am 20 years later, not living and immoral lifestyle. And I still have selfish tendencies, but I have a desire to overcome those and even a reason to help others and consider others more important than myself because of God and Jesus and because they are real. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, this gentleman is particularly tall, and his face was probably somewhat hidden, so I'm going to invite you guys to expose yourselves by stepping forward. You, sir?
Okay, Christine, I would like to address a number of things you said in your introductory 20-minute statement. I'll start off with the conclusion. I think you're creating a whole lot of straw men and you're tearing them down. One of the things that I discover, by the way, I'm coming from the Christian perspective. One of the things I discover when I look into atheist websites and anti-God websites and so forth is a terrible misunderstanding of the nature of Scripture. They talk about, yes, you're going to be stoned if you work on the Sabbath and if you eat shellfish and all the rest of it. The fact is, there are two main covenants in the Bible with two people groups. The Old Testament is primarily a covenant between God and the Jews, which was a national covenant. There was an actual nation that made a covenant with God that you will be our God and we will obey your rules. That covenant has been abolished. In the New Testament, we have a covenant between God and anybody regardless of any ethnic background, Jewish, Irish, Scottish, which is me, Filipino, to come to God and be in covenant with God through faith in Christ. Now, when people drag up things from the Old Testament that no longer apply today, I mean, when you read Paul's writings, it's obvious that these Old Testament prohibitions about keeping the Sabbath, not eating shellfish, and all, you know all the rest, you know them, are not applicable today. So I think it's improper to drag things out of the Old Testament that aren't even enforced today. So that's my first point. Second point would be, now, I am an evangelical Christian. I've had numerous gay roommates. I've had gays working for me in my company. I don't hate gays. So because I disapprove of the practice and the lifestyle, and I believe God prohibits the practice, I don't hate them. So I resent being called homophobic. I love my gay friends. I talk to them all the time. So I think that's improper. Also, third is talking about Jojo's presentation of aborted little people. Well, perhaps it's unfortunate that young people, children and teenagers, are exposed to this, but if you believe that the unborn are actually people, we have a responsibility to protect them from murder. And
30 seconds.
okay, my last point, I am a huge World War II buff. My uncle went to Spain to fight the fascists in 1937 as part of the International Brigade. Both my parents were in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Leave it at that. At the end of World War II, when the concentration camps were discovered, the Allied generals, including General Eisenhower, forced the German citizens to march through the concentration camps to see what they had actually stood for and what their government had actually done. And when presentation of aborted little people is put out in public, we are doing exactly the same thing. The idea that aborted people are fetal matter and pregnancy tissue is a lie, and we show the public what is really going on, and they react appropriately.
Thank you very much. Next intervener, please. Mr. Terleski.
Thank you. You know, in Christina's worldview, I guess none of it really matters at all. I think David Suzuki said it best, we're maggots consuming maggots waiting to consume other maggots. I mean, what does any of it really matter? You're going to be dead in 20, 30 years, I'll be dead in 50, 40 years. and we were just maggots consuming maggots. And that really is the worldview of atheism. There is this ball of matter floating in the universe. None of us have any conception how it got here. It just happens. The sun comes up, it sets. Everything is just happenstance. That is actually anti-science. Science does not believe that things come out of nothing. They do not believe you can take a bunch of metal in your hand, throw it in the air, and it becomes a Cadillac. They do not believe that happens. Yes, they would call you insane if you proposed that. It is equally almost illogical to believe that everything out there is by happenstance. And let's just get to the issue of believing in nothing as well. I traveled to the Soviet Union when I was a young socialist. I was 25 years old. I spent 3 months there. And what I met were young people begging for the gospel. When the Soviet Union fell apart, the first thing they asked for were Christian missionaries to come into their country. Putin even asked for it, to teach them some sense of morality. And what was the morality in the Soviet Union? Abortion as birth control. Women in the Soviet Union were having anywhere from 5 to 6 abortions in their lifetime. But yet, Christina proposes that genital mutilation is a terrible thing. She's right. But I urge her, like I did when I was a young person, touring Henry Morgenthau's clinic, and I asked him, what is that machine there? That's the suction machine, he said to me. You know what that suction machine does, ladies and gentlemen? It tears apart a little baby human being and sucks them out through a tube this big. No, it's not off topic, because she proposed the idea that humanity will become more compassionate. No, we're not. We're killing more unborn babies by the day and the year in this country, in the United States. So it continues. We're not becoming more compassionate. We are not inherently a compassionate people. If we were, the Holocaust never would have happened. Millions of people would not have sat back and allowed their neighbors to be rounded up and put on cattle cars and shipped to camps and not asked what is going on here. ISIS would not be slitting the throats of people in front of lakes and tossing them into the ground like garbage if we were becoming more compassionate. And again, why should we care at all or even it shock us what ISIS is doing to these individuals? If David Suzuki is right, they were just maggots consuming maggots, waiting to consume more maggots. It really is the Darwinist principle that you need to step on above and continue. To step on other people's heads to get further ahead. So really, the real rational idea is that we are more than just a composition of human cells and maggots. We are an individual creation by a unique God. And you know, I challenge Christina that if she actually says, wait and give me the truth, wake up in the morning, look up at the sunrise and the universe and ask yourself, how did that all get there?
Thank you very much. Next intervener, gentleman over there, please.
Hi, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it. It seems like everybody's been beating up on Christina. I'm not going to beat up on you, but I do have some questions. I think the debate got pretty off topic. Obviously, that tends to happen, and that's fine. I think that regards to the subject of the debate, in terms of what is a good explanation for rationality, and if I'm correct, was Joe just correct in saying that you're more of a determinist? You believe in determinism? Are you a determinist? Is it okay if I ask that, or is it?
That's determinism versus free will. That's one I struggle with, and I've looked into it, and I've become fairly persuaded by Sam Harris's arguments about determinism. So
okay.
I'm not inclined to believe in free will, but
sure.
Still.
Okay, and that's pretty common, I think.
Although I think we can behave as though we have free will, right?
Yeah, well, I think we can behave as we have free will because we do have free will. And I guess, so my question would be, from a materialistic worldview, where essentially at the foundational level, there's just particles rearranging in different ways to create everything that we see. Particles don't have anything like intentionality. They don't intend to do anything or be rational. When you mix baking soda with vinegar, it doesn't choose to make bubbles. It does that because that's what happens when you mix baking soda with vinegar. If we're determined in terms of what we believe, how we think, if everything about our behavior, beliefs, thoughts, emotions, actions is the result of purely chemical and biological processes, that would mean that your belief or non-belief in atheism is only because that's what you were determined to think, not because it's true. And likewise for Jojo or myself, our belief in Christianity would not be because we have the ability to choose it based on rational discourse. It would be more because that's the way our biology determined us to think. And so when I look at that, I find that to be a very foundational, systemic problem, despite all the red herrings and straw men that went on here. I think when we get down to the topic of the debate, I really have struggled to see how how somebody who believes in materialism as a foundational part of their worldview and therefore goes to determinism, how you can claim any sense of rationality. Particles don't reason, they just react. We just do what we do because that's what our biology and our physics are telling us to do, and we don't have a choice in the matter. That's
And so what if that is the case? How does that prevent us from being moral?
Well, it doesn't prevent it. It removes the category of morality altogether, because morality is.
We evolve in societies and in kin groups and stuff like that, right? And morality might just very well be one of these ways to help ensure the survival of the species. So what? Do you
Morality,
find that so
but-
frightening that,
No.
you can't comprehend morality around that? Because
I guess
that's
what
the
I'm
issue
saying
here.
is that morality entails the ability to choose otherwise. Computers don't make moral decisions because they perform their operation correctly. They're doing what they were programmed to do. That's like determinism. The program's set up and they run the way they're supposed to run. We don't say the computer did something virtuous or immoral if it crashes. The computer just crashed. And morality entails the right to do the ability to choose otherwise, which is where free will comes in, and that's why we believe that that's necessary. That's why I believe it's obvious, and that's where morality comes from. I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lady over there, please.
So this is a question that I have for Christina. You had made 3 different statements. One, that everything is okay as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Did you not make that statement? Morality,
I think that's misconstruing it a bit, but
Okay.
essentially, that
Essentially.
we have
As long as it
autonomy
doesn't
and,
hurt
and
somebody.
bodily and social autonomy to the extent that we do no harm to others.
Okay. And then you said abortion. If you want to have an abortion, if you don't want to have an abortion, then just don't have one. But women should have the right to choose, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So how is abortion not hurting someone?
I guess that depends on whether you conceive of life as beginning upon conception, or if you take a more nuanced approach and contemplate things like when that fetus or zygote has the capacity to suffer, and also in terms of
Okay.
Have
Have you ever seen an abortion film?
Women. I'm not quite finished answering the question. Women are not to be treated simply as vessels. If their life is at risk and it's a necessary medical procedure, then I don't think that's immoral.
Okay. All right. So my question to you is, have you ever seen a video of a woman having an abortion?
I have. What's your point?
Okay. So the point is that fetus is feeling something.
We haven't determined that scientifically yet.
Scientifically,
we have some
we have.
understanding.
Biology
Look, we
states-
anesthetize fetuses in the womb to perform surgery on them. So I think
No.
we do have a.
No.
I'm talking about
No.
suffering. I'm talking about suffering. We know that after a certain stage that a fetus can suffer, and it's not abortion is a free for all that everybody should just freely
But in
access.
Canada it is.
No, there's
Oh, it
there's
is.
restrictions.
No,
on
there is
it.
not. No,
There
there
are
is no
restrictions
restrictions.
on-
There are no restrictions
Well, I
in
won't argue
Canada.
this.
There are no restrictions
Okay,
in Canada.
folks, let's just take a breath here, because this here is a secondary debate on abortion, and that's not what we're here to debate. Okay? We're here to talk about the rationality between Christianity or atheism. I know that abortion is a heated debate, and we have had it, and we will have another debate on abortion. So please, we'll make some announcements at the end where we can discuss that. That's fine to bring it up as part of an argument, but not to get in a big fight about it. Okay? We don't want anyone fighting here. We just want everyone to have their say.
Next gentleman.
Next gentleman.
Hi. First, I want to say thank you very much, Christine and Jojo, for coming out and presenting today at Speaker's Corner. This is my first time at Speaker's Corner, and I'm quite excited to be here, and I'm hoping I can come here on a regular basis. A little closer? I'm too worried about my pops, so I don't want to. Okay, so I want to first state that I was born and baptized Lutheran. Was confirmed as a Lutheran faith at 18 years of age. I am 32 years old, and I am no longer practicing Christian. And that is because I believe over time that I have begun asking rational questions about the nature of Christianity versus the absence of a God, of a supreme being, of a maker, and some things just didn't make sense to me. Now, granted, the Christian lifestyle is a very good lifestyle with high moral standards and a very positive lifestyle to live up to. Whether or not it's true is not important to me. What's important to me is that that Christianity, whether or not it's true, still is a positive outlook or a positive lifestyle for anybody to live by. However, what the things that kind of led me astray would be, I'd like to take an example of 1950s, 1960s, the very first man to orbit the Earth, Yuri Gagarin of the Soviet Union. When he was up in space in the Soviet Union's first orbital vehicle, he said, "I am 27,000 miles or whatever it was up in the sky. I see no God here." And as far as humanity has traveled beyond Earth, the farthest we've gone is the moon and back, and we have not seen heaven. We have not seen any evidence of the existence of a God. And I personally think to myself, when I look at the size and the scope of the universe, 4.7 billion years old, and our planet Earth is just a tiny, tiny speck in the Milky Way galaxy, I can't help but wonder why anybody would devote as much attention as they have to this planet as God has, according to Scripture. Why are we so important?
We have a quick question Jojo would like to ask you.
I promise, no debating. But thank you for commenting. I guess my only question for you is this. The same question I asked Christine is, why should we be rational?
That is a good question.
Leave it there.
I suppose I'd have to say that humanity as it is now has reached a stage where we are afraid to step out of line through force of law and through force of authority. And it is that which keeps us in line and allows us to worry less about our hunter-gatherer instincts in forms of survival and allow us more to think openly about philosophical debate. There was a period of time where if people gathered like this and had discussions, that some of us may have risked being executed on the spot for saying the wrong things, and so that would stifle rational debate. But now in their society where we are free to discuss these things freely and openly, we are no longer worried so much about survival. It allows us to direct our mind into different areas of thought, particularly rationality, the basis of religion or the basis of non-religion.
Thank you very much. Lady over here, please.
Well, this is the first time I've ever experienced anything like this, and I am really, really thankful to both speakers who has come. And I guess what I would just like to present to Christine is that, no one wants to attack anyone. And so it's not a Christian attacking an atheist or a believer and a non-believer. You talked about freedom, and my question and my thoughts to you are, Christine, is that are you really free? Because are you really free? Because I have not been a Christian my whole life either. And believe me, I was not free before I've come to know the truth. And, lots of times, we argue what is the truth. Well, the greatest reason that I even speak to people about what I believe is because someday I know that everyone is going to know the truth. And the reason that I ask if you're free is because Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the light. And those that know the truth shall be set free." And so, you have a right to promote the things that you've come to believe that's true. And unfortunately, someday we're all going to know what's true and what isn't true. And it would be really a shame for you to get to that end and find out that your ladder was against the wrong wall. Now, if you want to really know, is there a God or isn't there a God? Why do you think Jojo's here? It's because God is reaching out to you, and He wants you to see some things. And that is the greatest reason why all of us came. It's not to prove that I'm right, not to prove that Jojo's right. My heart goes to you because I sincerely hope that someday that you will know the truth because you matter. And many times when people come against and when they want to attack or they argue what we believe in.
30 seconds.
Okay.
Sorry, it's just that there's a lineup behind you.
Yeah, that's okay. But the thing is, though, is that the reason I keep doing it is because I care about you. In myself, if it wasn't for my belief and for God inside of me, I would say, you know what? Have at her. Just go for it. Live your whole life like that. But it's because that we do care, and it's because Jojo cares, that he has dedicated his life to this. And I know that you believe that you care too. But it's all about truth. You can reject the truth, and you can deny the truth. But you can never change the truth. So I wish you all the best, Christine, and we really do care about you.
Did you have a question? Okay.
Next gentleman.
Hey there. Thank you for this debate. Highly interesting. I'll start by answering the question that Jojo asked first. For me, I'd say rationale is a systemic endeavor to explain why we do what we do. And building on that, there's atheist rationale, there's a Christian rationale. Now, I'm a pragmatist, so I'm not here to debate the philosophical aspects of life. I want to ask you, you stated that you think that Christian rationale or Christian belief is the way things should go. Building on that, how pragmatically do you actually see Christian rationale guiding the way Canadian society and Canadian government or institutions should actually practice their policies?
That's actually a great question. Thank you for the opportunity to respond to that. It's really interesting that we're often as Christians accused of wanting to create a Christian theocracy, as we were accused today. But as a born-again evangelical Christian, we're evangelicals, we were commanded to try to convince people to be Christians and not to force them to become Christians through the law. Because if we were to force people to become Christians through the law, we wouldn't recognize them as Christians. So it's incoherent for someone to accuse us of trying to force Christianity on people because we don't believe they would be Christians in the first place. They wouldn't go to heaven anyway. So it's illogical to believe that. But your question is, do we want Christian principles to be guiding our Canadian society? It already does. Christian values things like human rights. Christian values things like human equality. Christianity elevated the rights of women in a society that treated them like property, where two women had to be required to be witnesses compared to one man. Right? Christianity actually has women discovering the tomb of Jesus. So Christianity, as its core, which says that God loves the whole world, and God gives us the freedom, by the way, which I also believe that we have the freedom to reject or accept God, would also be the one that allows for a democratic system that allows the same thing.
Yeah, follow up on that then. How do you reconcile that with the principle of Christianity growing out of religions that preceded it, whether it is Judaism or the Sumerian and Akkadian beliefs that came before it, or other principles, including to some extent the way that you mentioned Buddhism seeping into Christian thought through the Greek Orthodox writings and through the Ethiopian church then being sort of amalgamated into certain Roman Catholic thinking and et cetera, especially given that you recognize yourself as evangelical, who grew out eventually out of a reform coming against Catholic, but still not rejecting it.
I'm not exactly sure the question, but in terms of basic principles, the point is the law already imposes values on us all the time. I met a man who actually believed rape was not wrong. And I'm certainly glad that we impose values on him like rape is wrong, which, by the way, the Bible in Romans 13 does condemn. I don't know if Christina's read that chapter. But when it comes to these kinds of sexual ethics or practices, there's obviously a limit in terms of what we can impose. But it's not wrong to impose morality on people. The law already does that all the time. Even the right to choose is limited in terms of what we can do with our bodies. I can't have sex on someone's lawn in public. Right? My sexual rights are also limited if it harms someone else. And so the debate about abortion, as Christine said, isn't about choice or even bodily autonomy. It's what's being killed. And that's what I would add. So in terms of these principles you're adding, that's the same thing. I think God has given us some common sense ideas to be able to say which rules should apply to everybody and which rules apply just to Christians.
Okay, I'm thinking.
Sorry, folks, we're going to have to pick up the pace because there's a line developing. This gentleman here, 2 minutes, sir.
And unfortunately, we only have so much time here.
Will that suffice?
Christina, I really only have a question, and then I want you to respond to it. Okay. Now, here was the concern for me, Christina. It appears that there's a disassociation between science and the supernatural. So that's where my question comes from here, okay? First of all, here's my question. I'm putting a list together, and then you can answer that, okay? The father of modern, one of the main fathers of the scientific method, Francis Bacon, certainly believed in the supernatural. We had Isaac Newton, one of the most famous scientists that ever existed. He also believed in the supernatural. Now, we also come to Einstein himself. Now, the material I'm presenting to you, you can find in David Foster's book, The Philosophical Scientist, the one I'm presenting now, not the Newton. Okay, so there was Einstein, Albert Einstein, there was Heisenberg as well, and there was also the Eddington. They were part of what called the Cambrian group, and they all had come to believe that the universe was made of mind stuff, of intelligent design. So were you aware of that? And I just wanted you to respond to that.
Yes, I was aware of that, and I'm not quite sure how you want me to respond to that other than just to let you know, yeah, I'm aware of that.
My point was
Yeah,
simply that there seemed to be a disassociation between science and the supernatural. All of these people held to the position that the supernatural has to be involved in order for an understanding of reality to be intact. Thank you.
Well, there's no incompatibility of religious believers practicing science. Look at Francis Collins, right? I think the idea is that you check your supernatural beliefs at the door, because that's just simply not a part of the scientific method. So it doesn't bar any religious people from practicing science or contributing to it. It just excludes supernatural assumptions from its method, if that makes sense.
Okay,
very quick. Yeah, I think that's not what was the case with Einstein and Heisenberg. They believed that was part of the supernatural, of the scientific method. That's the point that I made.
People have believed in correct things throughout history and mass, and that's nothing unusual.
Thank you.
Next gentleman.
Hi, good afternoon. On the debate of atheism and Christianity, I just have a quick story and then a question. I had a dream one time, and the dream was there was a dark figure following me in a house, not very aggressively, but behind me, and I was going up the stairs to get away from the dark figure. The dark figure was getting rather close, so I went into the washroom and closed the door, thinking my reality would keep the dark figure out of the washroom. The dark figure entered the washroom, not through the door, but just somehow entered into the washroom, and then it looked at me, and I was trying to recognize it, but I couldn't see it. It was very ugly. And then it asked, and then it suggested to me that truth is surrounded by a maze that it has made in our society, that no matter how many times you go through the maze, you're usually going to always hit a dead end. And then he cackled at me, and then he just said that the truth is very lost to a lot of people. Basically, it reminded me of when I was a young teenager. I was about 14. I moved out with myself to Calgary, Alberta. I started peddling marijuana downtown here for about 3 or 4 years. During that time, I talked to a lot of people, and I had developed a lot of opinions on faith and different kinds of gods, Buddhas, beliefs, and the East Indian beliefs, and all sorts of cultural beliefs. And during that time, it was hard to develop opinion. I ended up getting arrested for trafficking, so in order to not go to jail, I ended up going to a rehabilitation center named Teen Challenge. During Teen Challenge, they were a discipleship center. while I was there, I was questioning their ideas on Christianity. I had a friend of mine tell me to be careful because of cults. So while I was there, I couldn't make sense of what they were saying, so I was deciding to leave the Teen Challenge. During this time, we were going to a church. One of the church members or somebody came up to me and they suggested that I was going to leave the Teen Challenge, and I didn't know how they knew if I was going to leave or not, but they just suggested it. So anyway, after this, they suggested that I take two things into consideration: whether there is God and whether there is no God. He said, if there is no God, then all you have to worry about is yourself. The reason being, because if this is all an accident, then after you die, there's nothing exists, there's no emotions, there's no feelings, there's no regard for anybody else. So therefore, in life, when you live, you should only live for yourself, because it doesn't matter how much you help somebody else, because when they die, they cease to exist, and it doesn't really matter. When you help yourself, if you have a happy life and then you die and you cease to exist, it doesn't really matter. So he said there's no consequence behind your actions if there's no God. He said if there is a God, though, he said then there perhaps could be a very big consequence behind your actions. He suggested that if there was a God, that the actions that are around, maybe you die and then it carries on, and then therefore emotion and action carries on.
30 seconds, sir.
So anyway, I went to a dentist. He pulled out 4 wisdom teeth. I ended up having a dream, and after this dream, before this dream, I made a prayer. And the prayer was, I don't know if God is existent. I don't know what his name was. I asked for a name: Buddha, Jesus, God, Creator, whatever. He ended up getting my wisdom teeth pulled out. The staff didn't give me my painkillers. A guy asked me to pray. I said, okay, pray. He prayed, nothing happened. I said, ha ha ha, I'm leaving Teen Challenge. He said, just give it a little bit. He said, have faith. I said, no, whatever. He said, I'll give you your bottle of painkillers if you give me until noon. I said, okay. Noon o'clock happens. I'm walking around. 11 o'clock, I walk back into the office. He says, do you have your painkiller? Or does your mouth still hurt? I said, yes. He didn't give me anything. He says, come here. I thought I was going to get my painkillers. He introduced me to a man. He said, I'd like to introduce my friend. I went to this man and I shook his hand. He said, this man's name is Michael. As soon as I shook his hand, it felt like a shotgun. Boom! Threw the pain right out of my head. Like a column of really warm water fell over me, and it felt like I was higher than high, like I took 20,000 hoots of crack. I went to take my hand away. I couldn't take my hand away. I went to look at him. I went to say, what the F-bomb? I couldn't talk. The guy told me, he said, yes, this is my friend Michael. He comes in the name of Jesus Christ. My question to you is, vanity, morality. If there is no God, do you choose to live for yourself, or do you somehow still try to live and help other people, or do you carry on and just be materialistic and live for yourself?
Well, I think maybe when this is posted online, you might want to review what I actually said, because of course we're accountable to one another in the here and now. That's the basis of humanism. So if I didn't make that clear, my apologies, but I think if you check out the video after the fact, you're going to have an answer to your question. And I just wanted to say, in terms of the gentleman that asked me the question earlier, I actually did write up stuff about this whole idea of, we believe in nothing and the universe from nothing and all that kind of stuff. And with your permission, I could maybe post what I didn't actually say to the site. Okay.
Yeah, so take a look for that. It'll be on our website and our meetup site, which we'll talk about after.
Mr. Reebok, 2 minutes, sir.
Hey there, thank you for the wonderful debate and for hosting this. I have a question for Jojo, and I myself adhere to a Christian worldview, however I do have a question. Sure. So I think a big tenet of this debate has been the construction of absolute morality, if objective morality in an absolute sense does exist. And reading C.S. Lewis's works, a lot of times he references the idea of universal morality being evident, and no culture is it honorable to kill someone, to rape someone, and he points to this as example, as evidence for a universal absolute morality that does exist. However, in your rhetoric today, you did reference ISIS and these various cultures that don't seem to have a regard for that universal morality, and I'm just wondering if there's compatibility between those 2 points.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's a very good question. Thank you. The idea that objective morals doesn't mean that everybody adheres to them, and the fact that people may disagree or practice a certain kind of thing opposite doesn't mean the objective morality doesn't exist. I mean, it's just, that's the same thing with laws. Just because we have laws that exist doesn't mean everyone follows them. So yeah, there are cultures and religious beliefs that will do certain things, but the answer Lewis gives is not the action that's moral; it's the principle behind it. So ISIS's principles, as the actions are abhorrent, and we may disagree with their principles, but in their minds, what they think is they're doing is actually objectively good. And Lewis would say that's because this idea that we should do objectively good things is a universal principle. And these objectively good things cannot exist, Lewis would argue, unless there's an objective lawgiver who doesn't live in time and space, who lives beyond us, which is, again, is why Christianity, I think, offers objective morality and atheism cannot.
Thank you. Next.
Hi there. So I just have a question for Christine, and I was a bit confused as to we were sort of seeing two debates today. We were seeing a debate about the rationality of Christianity versus the rationality of atheism, but we also saw this debate about these various social issues, gay marriage, abortion, things along that nature. And for me, they seem a lot less linked than they seemed to the participants of this debate. So the question I'm going to ask for you, is it possible for someone to be an atheist yet disagree with you on these social issues? Because you seem to hold the conclusion that if you are a logical, rational atheist, then you must also support abortion. You must support. But I mean, to me, these seem more a product of our current cultural context and what liberal views are popular right now, as opposed to something which comes from some sort of scientific method. Thank you.
Are you essentially asking me if atheists disagree with one another?
Well, to respond to
social issues, absolutely. And I think I made it clear that there's no sort of one unified body of like atheists. There's like I said, there's bigoted atheists. There's atheists who want to believe in God and think our society would be better ruled by religious believers. There's pro-life atheists. I know pro-life atheists. So of course we disagree on those things, just like Christians disagree on social issues. So of course.
Thank you. Our last speaker.
Hi, thanks for the interesting debate. I just have a question, a statement, but first I have a question to ask you. Do you believe that atheism can be backed by science?
No, it's a negative claim. It just means I don't believe in God or gods. So that can't be supported by evidence.
All right, thank you.
One more.
Okay.
I have a question for both of you, actually. One of the very first people that got up here said something about how their life was changed. They had addictions and such, and then called out to God, and God helped them and took those things away from them. And then people say that there's no proof in God. Well, okay, I might be blonde, but isn't that proof? To me it is. Could both of you answer that? Because I've had some miraculous things and I thought it was God.
It's anecdotal evidence. It is a claim of one person. Maybe over time, if there's enough accumulations and some empirical evidence to back that claim, then maybe we can take it seriously. But in the meantime, it's just a claim of one person. And, he could have easily said, I enjoyed a trip on mushrooms and made the same claims. They'd be just as believable in that capacity too.
So when you say some empirical, what do you mean exactly? Like what would be what you'd want?
Some way to test it in congruence with reality, to test it against reality.
Like if my arm have been hurt, broke, and then I call out to God and it gets healed immediately, is that what you're looking for?
If it gets healed immediately, or if you grow back, you're talking about a miracle then.
That's what happened to me.
Yeah, a miracle that defies the laws of. I take that. If I saw a miracle, I would believe.
Okay.
It'd have to be a pretty good one. I might just, especially if other people saw it too, and there was, and repeated, right? But no, I probably can't trust my own mind if I think I've had some experience like that, right? We're cognitive. Imperfectly so, right? Cognitive creatures.
Just 2 quick points on that, and I thank you for your question. How many people do we need for anecdotal evidence, right? We had thousands of people see the risen Christ. We have millions of people throughout history whose lives have been transformed. How much more evidence do we need? But I think the point that this debate raised is the fact that we're looking for evidence. The fact that we're looking to be rational, to be truthful, is not something atheism can explain. It's something Christianity can explain, because God is a mind that created the universe and gave us minds to be able to understand it. So in terms of the question itself, and the question earlier, the fact that you're wanting to be rational, the fact that you want to be reasonable and find the truth, is something Christianity is able to offer an appropriate explanation for, but atheism can't. If I could just point just quickly, and I want to invite Christine to do the same. If you want to know more about our ministry is faithbeyondbelief.ca, faithbeyondbelief.ca, and if you want to just ask me questions, tell me how you don't like my shirt or whatever, I'll be hanging around over here. I actually have some free Bibles and free Cases for Christ back there. My family's over there cheering me on. So if you want to get one of those and read this book that we've been debating, talking about, let me know. We'd love to chat with you some more.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming out today, and thank you very much for organizing this. And if you want to know more about the organizations I'm associated with, you can visit atheistalliance.org or americanhumanist.org or legionofreason.org, I believe it is. So thank you again, and I hope everybody has a lovely day.
So this brings to an end our session for today. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your participation. And do keep on coming out. And again, if there's any topics or speakers that they wish to bring forward, by all means, we're always looking for more. Thanks again.